Hey you guys, and welcome to another character spotlight from Sacred Shadows and Latent Light. So today I'm going to talk about Cora Madison. Now Cora is another one of the students who interacts with Elliot and Vesta, eventually gets involved in the play because everybody in the college interacts with the play in some way, either for or against. Her central conflict is liminality, dealing with necessities but also issues with having an individual identity while dealing with intersectionality within that. Now, she has a lot of convictions and passions, just like Elliot, just like most college students, all right? And her biggest issue is wanting to revolt against being pigeonholed or stereotyped because of her sex or skin color. She's mixed race, okay? Raised by a second-wave feminist mom and her black father's family in DC, okay? And her parents split up early on in her life, so she's kind of between perspectives, between worlds. And even within her dad's family, there's multiple generations, and so they have different perspectives. Even within that, there's different perspectives on American history, past and present. So, which means all that is together, it means she's pulled between many different interpretations of the world, and she's trying to find where she can fit herself, where she can stand as herself as a college student, but really, trying to create herself. Where can she stand if wherever you stand is an identity? She's trying to figure out how much of that without cutting any of those pieces out of her identity. And the book opens with this aspect of her. In one of the first scenes, Cora is trying to decide between majors. Now she's interested and drawn to philosophy. She's really interested in, there's others that she's drawn to, but she's like, man, this is something different, and it's something I can fight and struggle with. It's worth her energy. She's drawn between that and where she feels kind of obligated to go for practical reasons, where she thinks she can do the most good, which is actually women's studies. And in one of the first scenes, she has her first interaction with writer Coulson, all right, the professor who's going to do the Shakespeare play, and he kind of politely asks her to there's this contradiction there. He's trying to get her to wonder, is there a contradiction in trying to separate women's studies and philosophy, whether anything can really be separated from philosophy? And this is a kind of an Aristotelian way of looking at things, which she has a connection to Aristotle. You're gonna have to read about that. But the idea that philosophy deals with all the other sciences. Anyway, he asks her to face maybe if there's a contradiction in trying to separate women's studies from philosophy, whether it's not actually an outgrowth of it, or it presumes a certain philosophy of looking at a certain way of looking at the world, and whether seeing philosophy as impractical, like saying, okay, I want to do what I want to study, or I want to be practical. Maybe that dichotomy doesn't need to exist. Anyway, so it's in one of these first interactions where she's having to choose where she's gonna kind of put her energies in life, at least in the rest of college. She's a junior, and the interaction leaves her frustrated. It leaves her indignant. But just like with Elliot in the previous Elliot video, that there's something about Coulson that kind of charges Elliot. It makes him want to stand up and do something, because his issue is he hasn't had a difficult life. He hasn't had anything to test him, all right? And Ryder's the only guy that's like, okay, kick him, stand up, kid. Whereas Cora is like, wow, this guy shouldn't, he's a male teacher in a position of power. He shouldn't have said anything. It leaves her frustrated, and it establishes Coulson once again as a catalyst of conflict for her. He kind of forces her to face some of these issues that she's already engaging in, already living out. Like I said, she's kind of between a bunch of different worlds. She has hardcore second wave feminist mom who's like, don't let anyone open a door for you because you're a woman, because that's an insult to you. They don't owe you anything. And then it's very easy to be like, well, how does that apply to this immutable characteristic of my life, her sex, and not to her race? So she's trying to figure out those things, and in the midst of it, she tries to avoid stereotypes. She wants to avoid what she thinks they're going to expect her to do. So her central work, because I said in a previous video that every character has their conflict is kind of wrapped around this actual piece of literature, this book that they read at one point, and hers is The Great Gatsby. Now, she actually went to that because a lot of her friends and cousins were like, nope, Tom is a racist, this book is racist. They either didn't like it because it was like, okay, this is a difficult book, or it's like, okay, what do I have to connect with in this? Just like almost every high schooler that I've interacted with. But that drives Cora to The Great Gatsby, the expectation that, oh, this is a dumb book or I can't connect with it. That actually makes her want to read it more. And she sees in Gatsby something very similar. She sees someone like her, a liminal character who's trying to create himself. All right, Gatsby is he's trying to define himself in these new sets of definitions in East Egg and West Egg, and she actually, she falls in love with Gatsby's romance, capital R romance, not like ooh love, but like 1800s, like the romantic vision of the world where you see yourself as having the capacity and desire to reach the highest heights of experience and virtue, and the desire to see the world as a dream and to live that out. Now, she sees she thinks she sees what Gatsby misses. From her perspective, she sees, okay, those whose approval Gatsby is trying to gain, they're not worth him. He's actually looking down on them. At least that's Cora's perspective. And that leads Cora from high school to have kind of a strain. She has a really hard strain of daring, of hardness, of defensiveness, and even arrogance, all right? There's skepticism, because she sees herself at a height. Or at least she thinks of herself in that way, that like don't beg acceptance from people who might actually be beneath you. Don't get legitimacy from people that might actually demean you, which I think that's actually a really good thing. But it leads her to be a source of conflict for a lot of other characters, especially like the other students who themselves are just trying to figure out their lives. And that aspect of her is what comes up against Coulson, who to her and to other students, to their dismay, he doesn't disappoint them. They kind of expect teachers to, there's this theme in the book that the students are like, okay, college is not how amazing I expected it to be, except for Coulson. And it really, like, why doesn't he disappoint me in the way that other teachers might? He seems to be living out the things that I expected all of college to be. He seems a lot more, to her, a lot more like a Gatsby than a Tom. The conflict goes from there. Now, ironically, in trying to avoid conventional definitions, like choice of major, what major people might expect her to pick, or definitions of relationships, like are we dating, are we not dating, well, why do you need to define things, even how she interacts with Coulson and his plays, like instead of just, hey, this sounds fun, I want to join, or something, she actually maintains her position as a liminal figure. She wants to remain undefined. Now, this is an irony about her character. By trying to remain undefined, or not let other people define her without her permission, she's also trying to define herself, all right? So she actually stays in between definitions in all the different areas of her life. She wants to define herself, but she's trying to avoid preemptive definitions, let's say. She wants it to be her choice as the individual, which she knows will necessarily include all the aspects of her intersectionality. Right? She doesn't want to be pigeonholed as like just a woman or just black or just any of the other things that make her up, but at the same time, she doesn't want to deny those. All right, because she wants people to see her as a whole person. And she's really the idea of the individual as the smallest minority, which is an idea that actually goes back to where I kind of got her name from, James Madison. In Federalist 39, he really talks about like why the government is set up, or why he's arguing for the Constitution. Why is it set up as a republic? How does that protect the right of the minority against the majority? Which, I mean, we're going to go with what the majority says, but we got to protect the right of the minority. It's very similar to some of the ideas that Jefferson talks about in his inaugural address. But she's kind of between the natural law, Aristotelian, like, okay, I am a human being and there are universal things that connect me to people, and all the immutable aspects of her experience. And so, the idea that if you're going to look at the world and society through an intersectional lens, from her perspective, if you take that to the smallest point, you are looking at the individual as the smallest minority. And that might be a place where these two ways of approaching society meet. On the one hand, she's trying to resist the idea that she is all the immutable aspects about her, while still maintaining the necessity to look at those things and as essential parts of her identity and her perspective. And this often places her in conflict with the other characters, like I've said, who might actually try to place definitions on her, or who she fears they will. She expects them to, so she it preemptively gets defensive, which ironically, she's judging them before they actually do anything, kind of doing what she's fearing they will do. All right, but she's going against people who implicitly ask her to behave in predefined ways. And part of her conflict in this, I want to have a place to stand, but I'm also a liminal figure. I don't want to be defined before I give permission for that, or before she defines herself. Her conflict is in defining where she stands and learning what amount of definition is stifling the way that she kind of expects, and then what actually might be beneficial. Where is it actually a good thing to, like, okay, I'm going to share the same definition as this other person. She's an amazing character. She's one of my they're all my favorites. I've been humbled, as with a couple of the other characters, I've been really humbled by writing her, and it's really, I think, enriched the book. I think Cora, she grows and others grow around her. She's a different character. She's not at all a bad character. She's a college student. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Look forward to more, and I'll talk to you later.